Before the COVID-19 pandemic, Nigeria had more than 10 million out-of-school children, one of the highest in the world. But with the closure and gradual reopening of schools due to the pandemic, there is a high chance that many children won't return to school, adding to the already high number of Nigeria's out-of-school children. In the northeast, it is a bleak story for many children as the insurgency has prevented them from enjoying their right to education. Joining me via Skype from the United Kingdom is founder IA Foundation, Ronke Adiagbo. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast. Now, like we pointed out, the pandemic forced children out of school, and recently we have been seeing reports of insecurity where students are being kidnapped, adding to the number of out-of-school children, and a lot of parents beginning to talk about withdrawing their words from certain schools. How is this compounding the challenge we already have at hand?
Good morning, Veronica, and thanks for having me. I mean, more importantly, my heart goes out to those that have lost their life in Borno, in the bomb. And just to say, without a doubt, this insurgency is actually exacerbating the issue of out-of-school children. Security is a big challenge in Nigeria at the moment. And I pray that God will give us the wisdom in the country to be able to tackle this menace. Without a doubt, I mean, from Chibok to Dapchi to Kangarawa, you name it. You know, children have been used as soft targets to get money out of the government. This is unfair on the kids. They only want to get a decent education. By scaring them from going to school or from their parents sending them to school, that means we're going to increase the number of out-of-school kids, and therefore the future generation of Nigerians that are going to lead us, that are going to provide the labor, are going to be uneducated. And now you can guess what that means for our economy. So I would really, really implore the government to actually seek external support on how we can address these security challenges in the country.
Now, beyond the security challenge, there's also the concern of household poverty as a result of COVID-19. You would recall that a lot of persons lost their source of livelihood. Offices shut, businesses lost. And how much is this also compounding the situation?
It's interesting you say that, because just last month, on the 21st of January, the government released a data saying out-of-school kids have reduced from 10.1 million to 6.9 million. And I did say on the previous interview that we need to interrogate that figures. You are absolutely right that with the pandemic and most homes going through some financial crisis, they might have told their wards to just stay at home. But the reality of it is that, as you know, education, primary school education and secondary school education is free in Nigeria to some extent. So if the education is free, and there's also the free school initiative where they can at least get a meal a day, I don't really see why the pandemic or the loss of livelihood in the family should affect them sending their kids to school.
Now, it is UNESCO recommended that 15 to 26% of annual budgets should be designated for education. But what we see, what we have, even as at the year 2020, is about 6.7% of the annual budget being designated for funding for education. And the concern for a lot of persons is that if we really want to move forward with regards to education in the country, a lot has to be done with regards to funding.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. But we need to give credit to the government, because most Western world, when you look at their spending on education to GDP, it's usually about the 5 to 6%. But Nigeria is running at 7% at the moment, rounded up. And I must say that's a bit higher than all the Western world. However, the issue we have is that we've got decades of not paying attention to education, because the Western world, they've always been paying attention to education. So we've got a huge deficit, which we are trying to mop up. So it makes absolute sense. What UNESCO is saying is absolutely right, that we need to double up on the amount we are spending on education. I mean, from the data in 2014, Nigerian government spent over 10% on education. So for me, it's begging the question, why drop from 10% to 7%? If anything, it should be the other way around. It should actually be going up and to be doubling up to the around 14% to make sure we are actually investing and making up for lost years.
And so what are the implications of this underfunding?
Yeah, underfunding obviously means the schools do not have enough resources. Because as you would appreciate, the data, according to the government, is saying we've got 6.9 million at the moment out of school. Now, let's just imagine, just like magic, we decide to make sure all those 6.9 million actually start enroll in school and they start going to school. Do we have enough resources? Do we have enough classrooms? Do we have enough teachers? Do we have enough books? I don't think so. So if you don't put the investments in, you can't now start saying that, oh, you want to get the 6.9 into school because you haven't got the resources in place in the first instance. So let's resource our schools. Let's make sure we've got enough classes, enough teachers, enough books. Then we can start talking of getting these kids off the streets and into the classrooms.
One other issue is the aspect of curriculum, the curriculum being used in schools. There's a lot of experts believe that when you place this side by side with what you get outside of the country, that the curriculum is still far behind. How does this concern you?
As you'd appreciate, technology has taken over the world. Right? So there's a huge digital transformation. So we also in Nigeria must make sure we move at the same pace. The issue we are having in Nigeria is that we are so blessed. We've got talented population. Our children are really talented. However, if they don't have the resource to actually use to be able to educate themselves in the modern way, then there will be a problem. I'll tell you, when I was growing up, I had my schooling in education in Nigeria. In the university, I was studying a course called Management Information System. Naturally, if you're studying management information system, you must have a computer to study this. Throughout my stay in university, I was studying the course and I never saw a computer with my eyes. Now, how do you expect me to compete favorably with people from the Western world if I've never seen a computer? In the Western world, kids from age 3 upwards, they're already on their phones, they're already, digitized already. So it gives Nigerian children unfair competition that we struggle to compete with our counterparts in the Western world. So again, it comes back to resources. We need to make sure we resource our schools with state-of-the-art technology. My foundation is actually investing in distributing e-learning devices, especially during the lockdown, to make sure kids, even if they're at home, they can still be learning using e-learning devices. The government needs to go down this route.
Another aspect is capacity building, teacher training and upskilling. We saw that the pandemic brought to us a new way of living where a lot of persons had to use various platforms to learn. And it seemed there was a lot of struggle with that aspect for a lot of schools, although we saw some private schools adopting online learning. This is also another concern that a lot of experts believe needs to be addressed.
Yeah, Nigeria is a bit behind the curve. So when the pandemic arrived, we struggled because if we had been well-resourced, we already been digitized, we've been using all these e-learning devices. Even when the pandemic struck, we will still be okay. So what we find is that now that we find that we're in a situation of a global pandemic, we now need to quickly equip our teachers to make sure they are very digitally savvy and they can use these IT resources to be able to teach the children in the first place. Because if the teachers don't know how to use these devices, how do we expect them to teach the students on how to use these devices? So I think a lot of investment needs to be done in terms of training, upskilling our teachers, to make sure they are very digitally savvy, they know how to use e-learning devices, and they can actually impact that knowledge on the children.
Well, recently, the government said it is looking to begin work on the alternative school program. That is a special education initiative designed to engage out-of-school children to ensure that no child is left behind in terms of appropriate basic education. Now, do you see that perhaps addressing this issue head-on moving forward?
I mean, the saying goes that the taste of the pudding is in the eating. We would like to see the government roll out this initiative and for us to see how well it's working. Because government do come up with wonderful ideas, but sometimes implementation is a huge challenge. As you would appreciate, the number of out-of-school children is not just the responsibility of the government. We need to imbibe in ourselves the orientation that seeing a kid on the street during school hours is not right. And the community and everyone at large need to take responsibility for this. We need to be in a position where we can actually challenge children that are out of school to say, why aren't you in school? So what I'm saying in essence is that it is a multi-sectoral initiative. It is a multi-sectoral issue. We all have to be joined up. So people like the public sector, the government, NGOs, the community, we all need to work together to make sure we can address this. Because if I'm walking on the street and I see a kid and I'm thinking, that's not my problem, my child is in school, it doesn't matter if that child is not in school, then that is not the right orientation. We all must all jointly see it as a responsibility that no kid should be on the street during school hours, and all kids should be enrolled in school to get quality education. So it's a joint responsibility, not just the government's.
All right, founder, IA Foundation, Ronke Adiagbo, thank you for your time on The Breakfast Show this morning.
Thanks for having me.